We are on episode 24, and like last time, Roger thought of a couple more stories that we missed from the prior recordings on his time in Europe. So, you want to jump where we left off?
Every time we have a session, I go to bed at night and say, oh, I forgot this and I forgot that. So every time we start interviewing, I have to have a catch-up session. So here we go. I happen to think of a couple nice stories, I thought, from Ukraine. One of them was on one of my trips to Ukraine, the wife of Greg was the right-hand man of Igor, good guy, and he reminded me of my son, whose name was Greg also, and he was a good man. He could fix anything, make anything, so every one of those entrepreneurs had to have a guy that could make the thing go after he decided what to do. So I got there, I don't know, maybe it was the second trip, and Greg said to me through the interpreter that his wife would like to see me without the interpreter at their house for dinner that night, and if I'd be willing to do that. It so happened that she taught English in the Ukrainian grade school, and she wanted to talk to me, picked a poor person because I'm not a linguist person, to find out what it was to chat with somebody in the English language without teaching them from scratch in the class. So I said, sure, I would do that. So I went over there at night without the interpreter, had a nice, simple dinner. They had two boys. We talked for a couple hours, and she said, would you be willing to come over to our school tomorrow morning and see our school? I said, sure, I'll do that. So I went to their school in the morning, and here, I don't know if this was prearranged or the timing was just right, but they had a program where they were portraying the nursery rhymes, like the Three Little Pigs and Little Red Riding Hood and so on and so forth, with costumes and everything else on the stage, and the parents of the kids were there. It was a big activity, and I remember they gave me 3 tulips wrapped in cellophane because I was there. So we had a nice time at their program, and then she said to me, would you be willing to meet with our 5th grade class of girls and be subject to an hour interview? They all had taken English, so they were asking me questions in English. So here again, from my episodial experience, I wouldn't say no, so I said, sure, I'll be there. So I remember some of the questions they asked. One was, when do girls get married in the U.S.? That was what the 5th graders were worried about. So I had a nice session with the 5th grade girls for an hour, and then I was invited to have tea or coffee and cake with the principal. So I sat down with the principal for a half hour or so, and he told me he was getting $50 a month for being a principal of the grade school in Ukraine, and he asked me questions that pertained to the U.S. school. So I thought that was interesting. I could sit down there as an Americano and talk to them and give them whatever information I have. I don't know how helpful it was, but it was interesting to me.
So you had mentioned when the Iron Curtain fell, it changed business pretty dramatically.
Yes.
How did it impact the schools? Did they get a whole new curriculum to teach?
I don't know. I didn't get into that. But as far as when Reagan came into office and Gorbachev, they had a cessation of bomb making, and we're going to have a cessation of all activities pertaining to armament and so forth. So Igor needed a piece of equipment made. So what are we going to do? He said, I know a place to go to. So we went to a Bulgarian machine shop. No, this was Ukraine, a Ukrainian machine shop. They had been making parts for intercontinental missiles or whatever. And with the war ceasing with Gorbachev and Reagan, they had nothing to do. So here we went into this machine shop, and there were about 20 mechanics there, machinists. They had turning lathes and milling machines and shapers and all the equipment necessary to make parts for missiles and bombs. Nothing to do. And they made the equipment that we wanted, and then they wanted to sit down and have an interview with me, with the interpreter. And here again, they were asking when people retired in the U.S. and so forth. And here again, people all over the world. It's just that a few people in government can influence the actions of those people and put them on a course that they don't want to be on, but they have no choice but following the practice. So I thought those were two things that were important to mention here because they were important to me. Here I was sitting in a factory that probably a year before that they were making parts for missiles, and here I was sitting there getting a piece of equipment to be made for the processing plant of Igor.
Did they share their experiences with retirement in Ukraine?
Well, they didn't have much of a plan. The same thing with the principal of the school. I mean, I guess they probably knew the answer that I was going to give them, but it wasn't an answer that they would like to hear. I mean,
well, they were probably confused because you were 80 and still working.
Maybe. They probably didn't know I wasn't getting paid either. But anyhow, I thought these were two interesting stories. And Ukraine is a country of about, I think it was about 38 million people. And since the war with Russia, I think it's down, I don't know, it must be down 6, 7, 8 million people. And they've lost probably a 500,000 people either through wounding or death. And I was in most of those places that the Russians have bombed now. A case in point, in Ukraine, they asked me to conduct a school. I don't know if I mentioned this before or not. A school for entrepreneurs that wanted to get into vegetable or whatever kind of processing, mushrooms. So I said, sure, I'll do that, not being a professor. And I worked with a professor from the University of Texas. And he was the guy that said, if you don't have enough margins, you increase your price. And I said, that isn't the way it works in business. When you don't have enough margins, you decrease your cost because customers are going to eat your business if you do this. So we conducted a school for 2 weeks in Poltava. And I had two interpreters. One interpreter was a 16-year-old young man by the name of Bubba. And he translated word for word. And I don't know if any of you have been involved with translators, but word for word is difficult. You say boo, they say boo, and then the conversation stops. Other interpreters go by phrases. So you can give a couple phrases and they will repeat that. You don't know if they're saying it right or not, but while you're gathering your thoughts for the next couple phrases. But when they do it one word at a time, it's very frustrating and disconcerting, be lecturing a group of 25 or 30 people with a word-for-word interpreter. And his name was Bubba. And then the next time I was there, I had another interpreter. And then next time, another interpreter. And they would find out somehow or other that I was coming to town. So every time I came to town, they all came up to my room because they knew they were going to get a dinner out of the deal. So they were nice kids. Stan Ketron and Bubba, I still remember the names of those people. And at night we'd go out and shoot pool in some pool hall someplace. So that's some experience that I thought I'd mention about Ukraine.
You mentioned the war in the cities. Have you talked to Igor about the war recently?
Yes, interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up. Igor has a son that worked in the plant, and Igor and his son and family are 100% supportive of the U.S. and Poland, and not in line with Putin at all. And Igor's son would transport war supplies from the Polish border through Lviv into the eastern part of Ukraine. And Alex said, they shouldn't do that. And I said to Alex, they should do that. I said, they're fighting for the life of their country, and you can't tell them not to do something. If you tell everybody not to do something, they will be part of the Russian Empire. So I said, if they want to deliver supplies, let them deliver supplies. It's their heart. They're working for the victory. And Ukraine is doing a pretty good job. I think casualty-wise, the Russians have had about 4 or 5 times as many casualties as Ukraine. Ukraine has been noted for being some of the world's best hackers, and they also are pretty clever at making stuff out of nothing. So that's an interesting side view of this.
You know, one other global aspect is tariffs. We talked a little bit about how Antec was dealing with tariffs.
Yes, I think I told you in one of the episodes that Antic sent me a WhatsApp and said, I'm coming to visit you on the 19th of February, and I'd like to have lunch with you. I said, fine. So he had lunch with us, with Linda, and Linda, believe it or not, was in the memory unit, and she recognized Antic from our frequent visits to Poland. And he spent 3 hours with us, just talking and holding Linda's hand and so forth. And Linda died 10 days later. So it was so nice that he saw her before she passed away. Now, Antic left from here. By the way, Steve Dvorak, the owner of D&D Equipment, who helped pick up all this equipment for me, also was here. So Steve Dvorak, Antic, Linda, and myself sat there for a couple hours and a nice conversation. From here, Antic went to Dallas. There was a food show going on, and he met up with a national fast food service company. I won't mention their name because they're still doing business with them. And he ended up with 2.5 million pound order of cobettes, small pieces of corn cobs. And they had taken some corn cobs that didn't meet the specifications of Kentucky Fried Chicken because of length, but the length of the cobettes for this particular customer was such that they could saw those cobs in the 1-inch pieces and serve this customer. So he ended up getting a 2.5 million pound order, and believe it or not, they shipped 50 containers of 50,000 pounds each from Poland to Dallas. I said, what about next year? He said, we don't know because of the tariffs. So this is how tariffs affect a young man in the business of producing food. And along with that, Antic wanted a Honda car. And he couldn't get a Honda car in Europe. He had to buy one in the U.S. and pay a 22% VAT, value added tax. But he could buy a German car, which he didn't want, in Germany for no value added tax. So you can see how even a small company like Rune was involved with tariffs, and now he's involved this year with the tariffs up in the air. He doesn't know if he's going to get the business or not. He can bid on the business with the tariff, whatever it would be today, or was it yesterday? I mean, they change every day. And he probably couldn't handle that 15% tariff or whatever it is and maintain the business. So it raises a lot of questions as to how do I plan for next year? Do I plant corn to supply some of that U.S. business? But here, it's interesting that 1993 he had no business, period, and now he's doing business in the United States. And he shipped corn on the cob here too to fill some shortages that we had in the U.S.
One last comment on cars. You shared a story of an exotic car in Europe.
Oh, yeah. I came there one year and he had a Jaguar. I said, Alex, what are you doing with a Jaguar? Well, he said, I thought I'd buy a used Jaguar so that my people could have something to basically play with, I guess, or drive on weekends, and they would share it. Joe would get it one weekend, Pete would get another weekend.
Now you need to describe what this car looked like.
Yeah, well, you don't know what a Jaguar looks like, but he had the leather helmets and the goggles and everything else. And we went to Turin, which is about, 50 kilometers west of Oswavik. He said, you're going to drive the car back. I said, I'm not driving that car back. He said, yes. He handed me the helmet and the goggles, and I said, I'm not driving that car. I said, first of all, I can hardly fit into it. And secondly, I'm not going to get involved with an accident with a Jaguar. So I just folded my arms and said, I'm not driving it. So he drove it back with the leather helmet on it and the goggles. He didn't need that Jaguar, but he was trying to please his people.